Hi, everybody. For this episode, we're joined by Abubaker Sekatuka from the Eastern Region of Uganda. He is in the United States on a community exchange program where he is focusing on his passion of empowering young people. I think you'll find him to be a humble and centered human being with a strong desire to serve others. Abubaker, thank you for being a guest on the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to this podcast.
You're very welcome. I'm eager to learn all about your history and all about you as a human being. I'd like to start with asking you about your background a little bit. You have a bachelor's degree in public health and you have a diploma in nursing. And most of your work experience thus far has been in helping train health workers to assess and treat malaria, diarrhea, pneumonia, and malnutrition in children, things that can easily be addressed. Will you talk a little bit about that work and your willingness and eagerness to dive in and help with community health?
Yes, thank you. In this work, I work with an organization called Living Goods in Uganda, and we support our children. We treat children in the areas that you've talked about, treating malaria, pneumonia, and diarrhea. And we do this work through training community health volunteers. Majority of these are women, so we train them and we provide them with the digital tools to do this kind of work, and then we supervise them and we empower them through refresher trainings, and we do give them a little compensation, not a salary, but to appreciate the kind of work they do. And my interest in this kind of work, particularly in community health, has a story behind it. When I was a young kid, I had my sister in the family. She was this forgotten person because she left us and she was born with cerebral palsy. Before I started school, I was always with her at home, and while others were away, and she was my line of defense when I was playing with the other kids and they could tease me around. And although she could just crawl, she was my defender. So by the age of 5, I remember she passed on, got sick and passed on. And I was told that it was malaria. It was sad for me, and I never forgot that. And this is where all the way from my childhood, I always wanted to be a medical doctor, to treat children and women, because these are the causes that were so much attached to me. And here I am, I met this organization, and that's where the passion came from, working in communities, seeing children suffer, and I'm like, I should be part of this. This is the cause.
I'm so sorry to hear about your sister. It sounds like she was a real inspiration to you, and her life seemed to give your life some sense of direction. Would you say that's accurate?
Exactly.
And you started doing that by helping people fight off, maybe, easy to fight off kind of illnesses and things with little medicine or different ways to prevent things. And you probably saved lives, I would imagine. You don't maybe know that directly and say that young person is alive because of me or that person. But I bet you your work has saved a bunch of lives. And that is very I think, amazing that you do that kind of work. But now you're moving into, from the health arena into empowering young people and trying to give them a voice and help them feel confident about themselves. Why are you shifting from healthcare to more of a social side of helping young people?
Well, it's all about the background. You know, these things are not totally different. They are not different fields. It's like doing the same thing, but in a different way. So this is my background. Every day we dream and you want to do something. But along the process, you always learn something new, and that something new leads you to another thing. So in my childhood, my whole childhood wasn't all that you can really say that it was good financially. I come from a very big family, an extended kind of family whereby we have the mom, the dad, the biological children, the nieces, and other children that they don't really have blood ties with, but they look up to them. And because of that, always resources aren't enough for some reason. And I grew up with working on less resources. So you have to budget for what is there. What is not there, you let it go. And I have been privileged that I have persisted and gone through all these challenges while dreaming and having hope that I will make it. But there are those that I know, my age mates, my village mates, the ones that I grew up with, whom I know girls are having more than 6 children right now. Others, I don't even know what they're doing. They barely feed themselves. And these are my age mates. Others are even younger than me. So because of this, I started diving into how I can help them. How can I do this? And having that background in health and also human rights, then I had to merge the two. And we who have these chances to get new perspectives about life, self-development, it is our responsibility, I believe, to go back home and let the others know, the less privileged, that we can do this. We don't need anyone else to come and support us, to teach us to do this, but we can mobilize ourselves and organize and solve our own problems.
When I introduced you at the beginning of the podcast, I said, I find you to be humble and centered. I think you just described why I felt so strongly about that. You described a childhood that you're very welcome. You described a childhood that I think most would agree was kind of tough. And yet when I spoke with you, when we were getting to learn a little bit about each other, you said, but my childhood was the most beautiful thing. You were able to take and frame that in a way to something that is so worthy of being grateful for, your existence, your privilege, that you are now not in the same place as a lot of your age mates. And I'm wondering, how do you remain so humble and just centered? You're such a calm voice and you're such a reasonable voice and you're trying to do such big things. How do you do that? Is it just a personality trait, or do you have to work really hard at staying focused on being grateful for what you have?
Well, I can't say that it's a personal. I personally, I do believe that probably personalities do change with time and the different circumstances that you go through.
Yes.
My childhood I have several stories to tell about my childhood. I was this humble and humble child. I never wanted to socialize with others. I grew up stammering. It was too intense that I never even went, I never joined school early. I never joined kindergarten.
Wow.
So it was tough for me. Even playing with um, my fellow kids, they could laugh at me, they could tease me, and it was really tough. And I could just distance myself, get reserved. So until the age of 6, I remember it was age of 6, I went into coma, and a couple of months, around 2.5, I got up and it was a different story. I was speaking very fast, and I remember my mom telling me that the first thing I asked, I want food. And everyone rushed to get food because there was no food by that time. So when they gave me, I ate. I didn't even wait to be, asked. I just told them, you know what? I've been somewhere beautiful. I was with a man, he was wearing white, I was wearing white, and we were just traveling, walking in the garden of flowers. I just told them, and everyone was looking at me, and I was wondering how I'm speaking without difficulty like before. And it was a blessing in disguise,
Yeah.
Everyone thought they were going to lose me, but then I got up, I rose up, I was alive. And because of the speed of recovery, everything was very fast. It was like I had lost some time and I'm now trying to catch up. I was very fast in speaking. I was very fast in everything. So immediately they took me to school and I joined primary one, and I was tested. They brought the charts, animals, ABCs, and I knew these things because my older siblings tried to teach me. They could try to support me, like, you can do it, read this. And I could be like, A, this, stuff like that. But then I was like, A, B, C, D.
Wow.
So small, And that kind of family, it was a big family, but it taught me a lot of things. A lot of things. It was a happy family. Although we had those challenges, but we could laugh. I was told to sing. Even though there is no food, you sleep with a happy heart, So I believe the values that we had in our family contributed a lot to my later life. I always reflect. There's so many challenges, there's so many temptations that I've faced, but I first reflect, what would my father say if he was in such a situation? Or what would they say if I shared with them? And I already had the answer because I already knew what they already think.
Yeah. You tell your story so beautifully. It's just a pleasure to listen to you speak. There's something so soothing about your presence. And sadly, I have to interrupt that and take a short break. But when we come back, I would like to talk to you a little bit more about your presence and your demeanor. So we'll be right back. Abubaker, right before the break, I was talking about your presence, so calming and soothing. And you are an empath. You feel for other people deeply. And you talked about being soothing for other people, people that have disabilities or trouble engaging in general society. And you're very comforting and soothing for those people. And that empathetic self that you have is so strong. Can you talk a little bit about that? Have you always been that super compassionate person that could feel things on a very deep level?
Yes, I really do.
Yeah.
You know, I had, I won't say it was a very traumatic experience, but this stems from my parents, you know, coming from a polygamous family. That is not a problem. I wouldn't say it's a problem.
Sure.
If probably resources are there and everyone has enough, that's not a problem.
Mm-hmm.
My father worked in the late President Idi Amin's government, and he was a politician. And this is a well-known dictator,
Yes.
you know, and a lot of things happened. I would say he was a rich man. I don't deny that, but those are stories that I'm always told because ever since I was born, I never saw him work. You know,
Mm-hmm.
he got sick later on. So many events happened when the government was overthrown, and he became blind with those kind of illnesses.
Mm-hmm.
And I always visited friends to their parents' homes, and they could tell me about my father. And many of them could say your father was a good man because when he had money, he could help people. But others told me painful things.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, someone told me your father had money and he wasted it. And when I asked how did he waste it, and then I was told that he could help other people, but he could not help himself.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked myself, how is that bad? And I was told that's being foolish. How can you educate your relatives, your nieces, but I understood it later because he got this money at an early age and he didn't have a family by then, so he had to help his brothers, his relatives and all that. So by the time all these events came to change, he wasn't having enough, although he had children. And these stories taught me to be humble. I was always afraid. I was always scared to say, to say my story. Even at school, I had my father's name and I had to change it, to the extent that when they could chase us for school fees, like, you haven't paid, exams are, about to reach the dates for the exams, and they could excuse a few children, so they could ask, what's the name of your parent? Or when is he expecting to pay? Or this date or tomorrow? And when they reached me, what's the name of your dad? And I would say, and when Emia mentioning the name, the headmistress would ask, is Mr. So-and-so your father? And I'm like, yes. He said, okay. So go back home and tell him that we need the money.
Oh.
And yeah, so it was kind of traumatic.
Yeah.
And I went back to my mom and I was sharing with her all these things. And then she tells me, you know what? Whatever you hear, your dad was a good man. No matter what you hear, your dad has always been a good man. And I've seen that.
Yeah. So you loved him and and you have that ability to love people and not judge them for what they do, but maybe for who they are and what they can give to this world. It's amazing. And as I'm thinking about you talking about all this, I'm wondering, all these events and these stories, you have a story about everything, Abubaker. You have a wonderful way of describing your life and the things that you've experienced. How does all of that play into your work now, trying to empower people? What do you bring with you into that work? What kind of lessons, what kind of values, what kind of approach? How does that influence all that?
Well, my life has been a life of experiences. And one thing that I've observed that I'm very honest with is telling my story. It's a hard thing because I've been in different environments where people fear to talk about themselves. There's certain things that they feel the world shouldn't know. But the world has taught me differently because I've told my story to people who have helped me. You know, I would say that I've been lucky, but luck has a context. You know, it's not just a miracle that you stand there, but if you seek for help and someone listens to you and say, "All right, I'll do this," then it's luck. Not everyone who seeks help is helped, but still you've done something.
Yes.
One of those is telling your story, like sharing. So this is how it fits in the kind of work I do. I feel like there are so many people out there, especially young people, going through a lot. And I've had close friends whom I thought that I know, and yet I didn't know. I remember one close friend who dropped out of school 10 years back. I just met him and he looks older than me, fit to be, my big brother, a very young boy. But when I asked him what transpired, by the time we left, we separated, and he told me a very terrible story. By the time we were at school with him, he had his 2 little brothers, and he was living with a single mom. And he had to drop out of school so that he can go to work and support the family because the mom could not. And she was a diabetic, And it was a terrible experience. Now look at 10 years down the road. And when you ask him, what have you been doing when you didn't have a qualification? It's really terrible. I almost cried.
Yeah.
Just earning peanuts. So all these experiences and stories, I reflect on them, and then I feel like these are the stories that we should always bring out so that young people can be supported. And in these stories, you can know what they can do better and what you can contribute to their career development and building their skills. And that's what drives me.
To be good at this work, you are the epitome of what it takes. You can tell your story so well because you take time to understand your story and understand those events that have happened to you and the impact that they've played on your direction in life. So many people can't do that, and so many young people are struggling to take their life experiences and to make sense of that. I got to believe you are exceptional at helping young people understand their stories, because you can't tell it until you understand it first. And you have to be willing to go inside, be a little introspective, and be a little humble, and make sense of what happened to all of us in this world. We all have had stuff. I'm wondering, do you have just this natural connection with young people? Do they just love? I know you love to talk. You love stories. You love communication. That's just, you get joy out of that. Do you find young people just open up to you and tell you and expose themselves?
Well, it's not an easy thing, but I appreciate what you see in me, because I believe that's what they also see in me in the first place. And when I listen and I take things slow, and with that I gain confidence. They confide in me and feel they trust me, and they can share. And I can say that it's not only my stories or my experiences that have developed this in me, but sometimes I say I'm also a chamber of secrets of other people. And I feel like I'm holding this secret of this kind of person. I can't tell it to anyone, but it's like burdening me. Someone has entrusted with you a very painful experience, and they really need your support. And this is something that has helped me to develop, that kind of trust. How can you keep a secret? How can you support someone without revealing someone's weakness?
Yeah.
If they haven't given the permission, the consent to do so.
Yes.
And I can't say that it's a simple thing to do. It's really challenging. But you do it day by day, and it becomes a part of you, I guess.
I could talk with you for hours. I find your stories, and I think we only touched one of hundreds of stories I bet you have about your life and how things have shaped who you are. But we're almost at our end of our time already. And I just wanted to say thank you for being a guest. Thank you for being so introspective and being so humble and honest and centered and secure in your own skin with who you are, and to find the beauty in everything despite the challenges and the difficulties life faces. You're the epitome of just being hopeful and making the best out of what life gives you. And that's what we hope to do with young people. We hope to say, no matter what their circumstances are, just make the best of it, because that's what we're all trying to do. And I think that you are probably going to do that for hundreds, if not thousands, of young people, and really inspire them to find their own centeredness and their own sense of contentment within themselves. So thank you for all you do. Thank you for sharing your story. And
welcome.
Thank you for being a guest on the podcast. It's been wonderful to get to know you, Abubaker. Before we go, though, I always ask the guest, what words of wisdom or inspiration would you like to leave with the listeners?
One key word of inspiration that I would like to share is, people always undermine the power of spirituality, but you should always have a higher power that you get hold on. You might not trust anybody. You might feel you can't even share with your parents or your guardian or anyone you feel is responsible over you. But if you understand spirituality, if you understand that there is that supreme being, It doesn't matter how you understand him or them. It doesn't. Many people, if Muslims believe differently, Christians and other religions, but the overall thing is to understand that there is someone who understands you better. So when you feel like you can, that's where we derive our hope from. So you just try that. You are in your room, you are in somewhere alone, and you say, "Oh, I'm gonna make this. I'm gonna do it. I need your help. I need whatever." Just have. That's where we derive this life force from, to keep pushing no matter what.